Can you talk about the black triangles for a little bit? Because I gotta tell you, bro, I have been obsessed with these things since I was in high school. Actually, probably middle school is when the Unsolved Mysteries episode came out about it. It
Oh
was in
yeah,
the 90s.
yeah,
Um, and sometimes, depending on the source, that the they're different from the chevrons that were seen in the Hudson River Valley, but some people say they're the same things. And I just wanted to get your take on it because you have a whole chapter dedicated to the black triangles.
right. There's a whole chapter in the Skinwalkers of the Pentagon devoted
Yeah.
to the black triangles. Yeah. Well, the organization that I was talking about that looked into anomalies, that looked into cattle mutilations, NIDS, we also looked at black triangles. And, we were very, very fortunate that, um, in 2001, we had this sort of Illinois, it was a very famous case of four separate police officers had witnessed this black triangle going over their heads. So some of them took photographs. I mean, the photographs weren't particularly good, but we deployed a team of including a retired FBI agent, a retired Air Force Office of Special Investigations agent out to Illinois, and we interviewed all of the witnesses. And there were over a dozen witnesses that had seen the progress of this low-flying black triangle that had appeared in the. Actually, it was about 4 a.m. that it started, and then the last sighting was after 6 a.m. So it was in the air for over 2 hours. Different police precincts. There were four different police precincts who had seen it, had tracked it, had driven their vehicles in pursuit of it. So this was a really good case, and it became kind of legendary in the Black Triangle sort of investigations. But so NIDS became a sort of a central data clearinghouse for this whole phenomenon. We got literally hundreds of cases and reports of these black triangles from all over the country, from the United States and also from Europe. There was a lot of famous cases that had erupted in Europe, particularly in Belgium and in France. So we were privy to a lot of this data, and the sort of the central feature of this phenomenon was that these enormous triangular shaped objects that were silent, usually brightly lit, would be flying at very, very low speeds, sometimes 30, 40 miles an hour, very low over these populated neighborhoods, over interstate highways. And when I say low altitude, we're talking sometimes just over treetop level. I mean, we're not talking sort of a couple of thousand feet up. We're talking about really low. I mean, we had multiple witnesses who told us that this thing was so low as it was coming towards them that they started running because they were sure it was so low it was going to crash into the neighborhood. They thought it was just so bizarre. So over the years we accumulated, like I said, hundreds of these cases. They were all very, very similar, and they were all sort of over low populated neighborhoods, flying dangerously low, silent, and then they would be capable of extreme levels of acceleration where they could accelerate from a practically standing position to vanish within a second or two. So they had these really high level performance characteristics. And so the big question was always in everybody's minds from the start of the 1980s all the way through to about 2010, when these triangles were flying everywhere. Was this a United States special access program? Or was this some sort of, was this from somewhere else, quote unquote? And, throughout all of the time that we investigated these cases and all of we literally interviewed hundreds of witnesses to these things. We came to the conclusion that there was really very little chance that the United States government would be so foolhardy as to fly these extremely large experimental aircraft, very low, very brightly lit, over highly populated neighborhoods and highly populated interstate highways. For what purpose? This was not a single flight of a top secret aircraft. This was hundreds of different flights all over the United States and over Europe. So we came to the conclusion that these were not ours. These were not ours. And one of the chapters in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, we specifically talk about this case where a guy is in a small town in Georgia, rural Georgia, comes out because his son and their friends are sleeping in a tent overnight. He has a 10-year-old son and friends, and the dog is barking crazily. So he walks out and he sees one of these huge triangular things that's literally parked over his property, and it's moving very, very slowly, but it's gigantic. It's the size of a football field, and so he tries taking video camera using a cell phone. His cell phone doesn't work. All of the electronics die in the cell phone, which is very usual behavior for this stuff. Bottom line is he goes inside, grabs a high-powered flashlight, runs back out of it, and illuminates the object with the flashlight. Instantly, he turns on the flashlight. He gets this beam from the underside of this gigantic craft, hits him with this blue light. He feels burning on his skin almost immediately, turns around, crouches to get away from the thing. He feels the back of his neck burning, so he ducks inside it. He's really scared, but whatever this blue beam that comes from this object is really hurting him. So, he spent the rest of the time in his house. This object then eventually took off at a fantastic speed. But he woke up the following day with a really severe headache, and he had burns on the back of his neck, sunburn on the back of his neck. He started losing his hair over time. Our organization with the Defense Intelligence Agency contract had two contract physician scientists who were MD PhDs, so they were well versed in investigation of medical injuries. So we dispatched one of these guys who spent a lot of time with interviewing this guy. This guy had metallic taste in his mouth. His hair started falling out. The physician scientist took photographs of him. We had other investigators take photographs of him. He was losing his hair. He had multiple blood tests at the local hospital. He had really low red cell counts and white cell counts. If we didn't know better, he was suffering from some kind of radiation injury, non-ionizing radiation injury. So we had the fortune to have these medical people, MD PhDs, who were able to follow this kind of medical injury case over weeks and months. Over the weeks and months, this guy developed a whole bunch of weird tumors. He got really sick. And then slowly, after about a year, he started recovering. But we were able to take multiple blood samples over time, and we were able to document in extensive detail. And all of this, all this medical data was protected by the HIPAA laws, which is, the privacy laws. And our physician scientists operated strictly under HIPAA. So this guy's identity can never be revealed. But, the fact is we were able to track the health status, and his health deteriorated dramatically after this encounter with this huge triangle over his house when he got hit by this weird blue beam. Now, again, was this one of ours, or was it, one of theirs? Why would a United States experimental aircraft be radiating a United States citizen on their own property for no other reason than they shone a flashlight at it? What's the purpose of that? There was, again, we went through this whole exercise of what is the agenda of something like this. And again, we concluded that the chances are United States government deployed aircraft would never be as foolhardy as to deploy something like this over some guy's property, irradiate, cause a medical injury, non-ionizing radiation. The guy's hair falls out and he eventually recovers, but he gets very sick for a long time as a result of this encounter. So again, that's sort of a codex to the black triangle phenomenon. It's not always healthy, it's not always good for your health when you have encounters like this.
Well, I mean, the thing about it seems I can't buy into the idea that it's government either, because it just seems overkill for pointing a flashlight.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's something that somebody who doesn't think on our level would do.
Exactly. I mean, if you had a drone or a robot that was programmed to react a certain way, maybe you could sort of get your head around that kind of dramatic overreaction, that it was some sort of pre-programmed response. But it makes absolutely no sense. It defies common sense for somebody, if that was a manned aircraft and it was an experimental aircraft from the United States government, to react in that way is just defies common sense.